Are those supposed to be real? The question, laced with the casual disdain of a man who had never known hardship, echoed in the cavernous silence of the courtroom. Judge Albright, a man whose tailored suit cost more than the motorcycle Fred Hudson had ridden here, leaned forward over his polished A's, a smirk playing on his lips. He peered down at the old man standing before him for a simple traffic violation. Fred Hudson, 84 years old, stood perfectly still. His back was straight, a testament to a discipline forged in a time and place this judge could not begin to imagine. He wore a simple faded denim jacket, the kind that had seen decades of sun and rain. Pinned to the left breast just over his heart were 3 rows of ribbons and a single star-shaped medal hanging from a pale blue ribbon. They were the source of the judge's amusement. "Your Honor," Fred's public defender, a young woman named Sarah Jenkins, began, "my client's service record has no bearing on this case." Judge Albright waved a dismissive hand, not even gracing her with a glance. His eyes remained fixed on Fred. "I'm sure it doesn't. I'm just curious. It's quite a collection for a man who can't seem to remember the speed limit on a county road. Let me guess, you bought them at a surplus store. A little costume jewelry to impress the folks at the VFW." The small gallery, mostly filled with people waiting for their own minor infractions to be called, shifted uncomfortably. A few snickers could be heard from the back row, but most just stared. A mixture of pity and second-hand embarrassment on their faces. Fred Hudson said nothing. His eyes, clear and grey as a winter sky, were fixed on the state flag hanging behind the judge. He wasn't angry. He wasn't insulted. He seemed to be somewhere else entirely. A place of profound and unshakable calm. "I asked you a question, sir," the judge pressed, his voice rising. He enjoyed this. Small-town power of his position. The ability to dismantle a person piece by piece under the guise of judicial authority. "Are you going to answer me, or are you as deaf as you are decorated?" Sarah Jenkins stood up straighter, her face flushed with anger. "Your Honor, this is inappropriate. Mr. Hudson is a veteran and deserves our respect. Respect is earned, Counselor." Albright shot back his voice like the crack of a whip. "And parading around with a chest full of tin doesn't automatically earn it in my courtroom. Now, Mr. Hudson, for the last time. Where did you get the medals?" Fred's gaze slowly lowered from the flag and met the judge's. His voice when it came was quiet, but carried a surprising weight, like stones worn smooth by a river. "They were given to me." The simplicity of the answer seemed to enrage the judge further. It offered no purchase for his mockery. "Given to you by whom?" "The costume shop manager." He leaned back in his large leather chair, a caricature of smug authority. "Let's be clear. I am tired of men of a certain generation thinking a uniform they wore half a century ago gives them a free pass. You ran a stop sign. You were clocked at 20 m over the limit. And you stand here in this ridiculous jacket as if it's some sort of shield. I find it insulting to the real heroes who served." Each word was a calculated blow designed to humiliate. Sarah could feel the tension in her own body, a coiled spring of outrage. She looked at her client. Fred's hands, gnarled with age and speckled with liver spots, rested calmly on the defense table. He didn't fidget. He didn't flinch. He just stood there absorbing the judge's venom without a flicker of expression. "Take the jacket off," the judge commanded. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. This was no longer about a traffic ticket. This was a public stripping of dignity. "Your Honor, you can't be serious," Sarah pleaded, her voice trembling slightly. "I am perfectly serious, Counselor. This is my courtroom. The defendant will show it the proper respect. That display is a distraction. Take it off, Mr. Hudson, or I will find you in contempt." The bailiff, a burly man who had seen his share of courtroom drama, took a hesitant step forward. His eyes met Fred's, and for a moment he looked uncertain, even apologetic. Fred did not move. He did not look at the bailiff or the judge. He looked at the medals on his own chest, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second on the one hanging from the blue ribbon. He seemed to be listening to a distant echo, a sound no one else in the room could hear. His silence was his answer. It was a profound and unyielding no. "Fine," the judge spat, his face turning a blotchy red. "Balliff at a charge of contempt of court and a $500 fine. Maybe that will get his attention." The judge's eyes narrowed on the most prominent medal, the one that hung slightly apart from the others. He pointed a fat finger at it, especially that one. "The gall to wear a replica of the Medal of Honor. Do you have any idea what that represents, old man?" the blood and sacrifice it stands for. You wearing that is a slap in the face to every person who ever served honorably. As Judge Albright spoke, the sterile wood-paneled courtroom seemed to dissolve around Fred Hudson. The judge's mocking words faded into a roar, not of a hostile crowd, but of rotor blades and screaming men. The air, thick with the smell of floor polish and stale coffee, was suddenly choked with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid smoke of cordite. For a fleeting second, he wasn't standing on worn linoleum, but was back in the sucking mud of a rice paddy outside Hugh City. He wasn't looking at a judge's sneering face, but at the terrified wide eyes of a young private, a kid from Ohio named Miller, whose leg had been shredded by machine gun fire. The blue of the medal's ribbon was the impossible brilliant blue of the sky he glimpsed through the jungle canopy just before he'd scrambled from the relative safety of a bomb crater. He could feel the weight of Miller on his back, the hot wet soak of blood through his fatigues, the deafening chatter of the enemy guns stitching a line in the mud just inches from his head. He remembered the burning in his lungs, the singular desperate thought not of living or dying, but of getting that boy to the medevac chopper. The medal wasn't a piece of tin. It was the weight of another man's life. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, leaving Fred back in the silent, tense courtroom. He blinked slowly, his composure unbroken, only his breathing had changed, becoming just a fraction deeper, a little more measured. Sarah Jenkins watched the entire exchange, her heart pounding with a helpless fury. She saw the judge's cruelty, the crowd's cowed silence, and Fred's incredible, almost unnerving stoicism. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was a terrible injustice. The judge wasn't just wrong. He was desecrating something holy. She looked down at the case file. Fred Hudson. A few prior speeding tickets over the last 20 years. Nothing else. Address, social security number, date of birth. On the intake form. In the box marked military service. Fred had simply written yes. He hadn't specified a branch, a rank, or a single honor. The humility of it in the face of this public flogging was staggering. An idea sparked in her mind, a desperate long shot. While the judge was busy pontificating to the court reporter, adding his self-righteous justifications to the official record, Sarah leaned over to Fred. "Mr. Hudson," she whispered, her voice urgent, "is there anyone I can call from your old unit?" Fred turned his head slightly, his gaze meeting hers for the first time. There was no fear in his eyes, only a deep, profound weariness. He gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. "It was a long time ago, miss. Most of them are gone now. There has to be someone," she insisted, refusing to let it go. She saw a small, almost unnoticeable pin on his jacket collar. A simple crest she didn't recognize. "Let me just step out for a moment. I need to get a file from my office." The judge waved her away without looking. "Do what you want, counselor. Your client isn't going anywhere." Sarah practically ran from the courtroom, her heels clicking frantically on the polished floor. She ducked into an empty alcove in the hallway, her hand shaking as she pulled out her phone. She didn't have a file to get. She had the pin. She quickly typed a description of it into the search engine. U.S. Army crest soared behind a castle tower. The results flooded in. First Special Forces Group, the Green Berets. Her breath hitched. This was something else entirely. She scrolled through the search results, looking for a contact, a public affairs office, a veterans liaison, anything. She found a general number for Fort Lewis, the group's headquarters. It was a wild gamble, a shot in the dark. A bored-sounding specialist answered the phone. "Fort Public Affairs. My name is Sarah Jenkins," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm a public defender in Northwood County. I have a client here, a veteran. He's in trouble. We can't get involved in civilian legal matters," the specialist said, his voice flat with practiced disinterest. "I know, I understand, but his name is Fred Hudson. He's being held in contempt of court because the judge doesn't believe his medals are real. I can't. He's wearing a first group pin." She blurted out her last desperate card. "Please, his name is Fred Hudson." There was a pause on the other end of the line. The bored tone was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused silence. "Spell the last name for me." "Hudson. She stammered. "First name Fred." She heard the sound of furious typing. Then a sharp intake of breath. The voice that came back was completely different. It was crisp, urgent, and filled with an energy that made the hair on her arm stand up. "Ma do. What courtroom are you in?" Courtroom C, Northwood County Courthouse. Do not let your client leave. Do not let them take him anywhere. We are on our way. The line went dead. Sarah stood frozen in the alcove, her phone still pressed to her ear, the specialist's final words echoing in the sudden silence. We are on our way. Hope, fierce and bright, surged through her. Help was coming. The phone call ended in Washington State, but the shockwave it created moved at the speed of light. The specialist who took Sarah's call didn't hesitate. He bypassed 3 levels of his own command, patching the call directly to the office of the base's commanding officer, a battle-hardened colonel. The colonel listened, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his desk. The moment he heard the name Fred Hudson, he stood. Hold the line, he commanded, and without another word, he strode out of his office and down the hall to a larger, more opulent suite of rooms, not even bothering to knock. Inside, General Marcus Thorne was reviewing logistics reports. He was a man carved from granite and steel with 3 stars on his shoulders and a gaze that could peel paint. He looked up annoyed at the intrusion. Sir, the colonel said out of breath. We have a code Nightingale. The general's eyes sharpened. Code Nightingale was an unofficial unwritten protocol. It was reserved for a handful of living legends, men whose service was so extraordinary that the institution itself was honor-bound to protect them no matter the circumstance. It had not been activated in over a decade. Who? The general asked, his voice a low rumble. Sergeant Major Fred Hudson, sir. General Thorne was out of his chair before the colonel finished the sentence. The logistics report scattered across his desk, forgotten. A look of disbelief followed by a thunderous anger passed over his face. Where is he? Northwood County Courthouse, sir. A local judge is holding him in contempt, accusing him of faking his medals. Specifically, the colonel added, his voice filled with disgust. The Medal of Honor. The general's jaw tightened until a muscle bunched in his cheek. He moved with a speed and purpose that belied his age. He pointed a finger at the colonel. Get me a chopper to the nearest airfield and a car waiting. Full honor guard escort dress uniforms. I want to be there in under an hour. He turned to his aide, who was already scrambling to his feet. Get me everything on Judge Albright of Northwood County. I want to know where he went to school, who he owes favors to, and what he had for breakfast. Burn the phone lines. I want this handled to the colonel. He gave one final chilling order, and get the Secretary of the Army on the line. Tell him a national treasure is being publicly humiliated by a man who doesn't deserve to shine his boots. Back in Courtroom C, the air had grown thick and stagnant with Judge Albright's self-satisfaction. He had made his point. He had cowed the young public defender and was now preparing to deliver his final crushing blow to the silent old man before him. Sarah had returned to the defense table, her face pale, but her eyes holding a new defiant spark that the judge chose to ignore. Given your refusal to comply with a direct order from this court, Albright began savoring each word, and your clear state of delusion regarding your past exploits, I am not only holding you in contempt, but I am also concerned for your mental fitness. He let that hang in the air, a poisonous cloud. Therefore, I am ordering a mandatory 72-hour psychiatric evaluation. The BAIF will remand you into the custody of the County Sheriff's Department, who will transport you to the state hospital for assessment. This was the ultimate degradation. Not just a fine, not just jail time, but a declaration that Fred Hudson was crazy, that his life, his service, his honor were the fictions of a broken mind. The gavel was in his hand. He raised it high. The final punctuation mark on his petty tyranny. He never got to bring it down. A muffled commotion from the hallway outside interrupted him. The heavy oak doors to the courtroom burst open, swinging inward with such force that they banged against the walls. 2 soldiers ramrod straight in immaculate army dress blues entered the room. They moved with a synchronized powerful grace, one taking up a position on the left of the entrance, the other on the right. They stood at perfect parade rest, their faces impassive, their eyes fixed straight ahead. The courtroom fell into a stunned absolute silence. Judge Albright froze. His gavel still held aloft, his mouth slightly agape. Then a third man entered. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark green uniform perfectly pressed, the jacket glittering with its own impressive array of medals. 3 silver stars gleamed on each of his shoulders. It was General Marcus Thorne. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at the gallery. His eyes, sharp and intense, scanned the room until they found their target. He began to walk down the central aisle, his polished boots making a sound like measured deliberate heartbeats on the tiled floor. Click, click, each step was an indictment. Each step shifted the balance of power in the room. The air crackled with an authority that made the judges seem like a child's tantrum. General Thorne stopped directly in front of the defense table less than 2 feet from Fred Hudson. For a moment, the two men just looked at each other. A universe of shared understanding passed between them in that silent gaze. The general's hard face softened with a look of profound respect and something akin to reverence. Then, in a move that sent a shock wave through the entire courtroom, General Marcus Thorne snapped to the sharpest, most precise position of attention of his life. His right hand came up in a salute so crisp, so perfect it seemed to cut the air. His gloved fingers touched the brim of his hat. His arm a rigid line of respect. Sergeant Major Hudson. The general's voice boomed clear and strong, filling every corner of the silent room. It is an honor to be in your presence, sir. He held the salute, his eyes locked on Fred slowly, as if rousing from a long dream. Fred Hudson straightened his shoulders. The weariness seemed to fall away from him, replaced by an echo of the soldier he had once been. He brought his own hand up, his movements stiff with age, but no less precise, and returned the salute. Judge. Albright finally found his voice sputtering with confusion and outrage. What is the meaning of this? Who are you? I am in the middle of a judicial proceeding. General Thorne slowly lowered his hand, but his eyes never left Fred. Only after Fred had lowered his own hand did the general turn his head. He pinned Judge Albright with a gaze so cold and furious it seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 20 degrees. The meaning, Your Honor, the general said, his voice dangerously quiet, is that you are in the presence of a hero of the Republic, and you are about to learn a lesson in respect? He took a step toward the dais, pulling a folded piece of paper from his inner pocket. You questioned this man's medals. Let me enlighten you. He began to read, his voice resonating with pride and anger. Sergeant Major Fred Hudson, enlisted United States Army, 1958. Served with distinction for 30 years, 3 tours in Vietnam. Member of the 5th Special Forces Group in the Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. He paused, letting the weight of the legendary unit's name settle in the room. Awards and decorations include the Bronze Star with V for Valor, 3 awards. The Silver Star, 2 awards. The Distinguished Service Cross, the Purple Heart, 4 awards. With each medal named, a new wave of shock rippled through the gallery. People were sitting up straighter, their faces a mixture of awe and shame. A local reporter in the back was scribbling frantically in his notepad. And this one, the general said, his voice dropping as he looked at the medal on the blue ribbon. This gaudy piece of tin so casually dismissed. This is the Medal of Honor awarded to then Staff Sergeant Hudson for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. On February 4, 1968, near the city of Hue, Sergeant Hudson, with complete disregard for his own safety, single-handedly charged 2 enemy machine gun nests, eliminating them both, and proceeded to carry 3 wounded comrades across 200 m of open-fire swept terrain to a medical evacuation point. He then returned to the fight. The general folded the paper, his movements sharp and deliberate. He stared at the judge. This man's jacket holds more honor than this entire courthouse, yourself included. He is not a defendant. He is a national treasure, and you and your arrogance saw fit to humiliate him. Judge Albright's face had gone from red to a pasty, sickly white. He looked small and powerless behind his large, imposing bench. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was, for the first time in his professional life, utterly and completely silenced.